Cool. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. I'm Jason Hardy with EliteBBQ Smokers. This is Barbecue Roundtable. We got our special guest today, Mr. Paul. Introduce yourself.
Paul Buab with SmokinGhostBBQ in central Illinois, just north of Peoria, Chillicothe, Illinois. We're home of the IVC Gray Ghosts. So that's a little foretelling about something. So,
hey, it's be a good conversation. So I think the first time I actually met you, as far as shook your hand, actually met you, was last year at Sipping Swine. I think we've crossed paths or whatever over the years, but I think that's the first time I really come up to you and shook your hand, because I think you GC'd or RGC that contest.
We snuck one out. We survived our chicken is the best way to say that.
You survived your chicken, so you GC'd that contest.
Yeah.
Hey, Dean, glad y'all stopped by. Listen, everybody, I put a link on here for Facebook and YouTube. Just a heads up, Facebook has been having a little bit of I wouldn't say problems, but all the comments all come through there, and we have a little bit of glitching and some stuff. So if you're watching it, it's great. But also, if you feel like you're free to come over there to the YouTube side, I put a link in there. The comments and stuff be a little more consistent with that. But if you watch on Facebook, love for that also. Just want y'all interacting. Got one of your neighbors here, I think, Paul.
Not only a neighbor, but a compadre here in January.
Compadre.
We're going to head out to Bullhead City.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're talking about a little bit about that beforehand. So kind of get into it here a minute. Before we get on to the backstory here, you were saying earlier you cook by yourself a lot.
Yeah.
And we were talking about kind of like the good and the bad about it. Mm-hmm. It's really good about cooking by yourself to kind of figure out some kind of detail you want to figure out, or try something other, whatever. But it's also bad is because it's very easy to forget a step. So you were kind of explaining the process that you've been going with for the last couple of years. Kind of tell us a little bit about that and kind of what you do to keep yourself in check and on target.
Well, so probably 35 contests last year, probably 30 of them I cooked alone. A lot of times I get a box runner, but I don't always call a box runner cooking with someone if you've just grabbed a judge or something like that. Now, I want to be careful. There's a lot of judges that have been in my trailer that, helping me that are awesome. So, Gene Boldman was one last year, came in there and just rocked it, right? But when you get somebody to run your boxes alone, that's really, and there's Gene, by the way. But when you got somebody in the trailer that is knowledgeable, there's nothing, right? There's nothing you can do to replace that. It's amazing, right? And you're just so much more powerful because you kind of have a double blind feedback system, like ribs. When you're checking out ribs, having that second person is amazing. When you're cooking alone, right, your own biases are still there, right? So you've got to know your own, hey, Joel, you got to know your own biases and be aware of that and try to, steer more judicial on that, because if you think like pork being over, right? Maybe you like to cook your pork a little over, I tend to push it, right? Well, is my over? If I had somebody with me, on some of the monies, they could help me. No, Paul, I think it's right there. You're pushing it too much. But when it's me, I tend to push, right? So that's one thing about cooking alone. But when it comes to process and organization, the things I've done is I'm a checklist kind of guy. At Caterpillar for about a decade, I was in statistics and Six Sigma, and I was a master black belt. So, process and process adherence, variation to the process is evil, right? And so there are things I will do that, checklists, kind of project management, things I can do Friday night, anything that can be done in advance, right? You got to get them done in advance so it can free you up for the time you need your judgment. But, if you skip a step, and I remember a couple of years ago, getting done with ribs and turning around and there's the rib wrap sitting on the counter and it's like 45 minutes after, right? You're looking at yourself, well, do I crack them up and put it in there, and, I just went with it and it certainly wasn't the best outcome. But in the process, side of me says, okay, that was an error. I write it down in the book, a little book back here. I got, time on, time off, temperatures, all the attributes of the environment, the outcome of the event, what I thought went well, what I thought didn't go well, tenderness of the meats at the end, for my opinion, and that. But the rib wrap one, forgot to put rib wrap in it. So now when I, put the foil out, oh, by the way, the foil is done the night before, so I don't have to tear it the morning of, but I put the shot glass on top of the foil, right? And I put the rubs I'm going to use on top of the foil. The honeys I'm going to use on top. I can't close that foil for those ribs without having to pick it up and move it. So while it's still possible that I could move the juice,
yeah,
at least it's in my head now. I'm not gonna say, oh, I forgot it over here. It's right in front of me. It's on my work. Those are little things, right? On process, just to try and keep you on the game when you're cooking alone.
Yeah, and that kind of goes into again the process you got. But when you start working in your kitchen, in your trailer, this drawer's gonna have this piece of this knife. This knife's gonna be this part in this drawer. And when you start going with other people's trailers, I know you said you and Brian are cooking together. It's gonna be a little bit of a learning curve because I don't know whose rigs y'all cooking on, or if you're cooking just out of a pickup truck. But there's gonna be something like, okay, you reach for this. I mean, it's amazing when I cook here at the house, like YouTube videos and stuff here. I'm always reaching up here for paper towels. I'm reaching for paper towels. I'm like, well, they ain't there. They're supposed to be right there, but they're not there, Right. And it's really, truly the way that process, you start making that repetitiveness that you're going to get in there. And what you'll find out sometimes is when you make those mistakes, and truthfully speaking, sometimes you make a mistake and you'll find out, man, that really helped it out.
Yeah. True.
Or maybe I've been overpowering it so much with extra of whatever to make it too spicy, or maybe I'm making it too sweet, or maybe I'm doing something too much. And it's really good sometimes, because sometimes the best answered prayers is the ones not answered. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but
I agree with that. Yeah. There was, trying to think of the example this year to that exact point where, I know I tend to push the brisket as well. I think Brian and Brendan were kind of like, you might be cooking a little too long, so started playing with that. And sure enough, I started backing it off and started hitting it again. I was doing exactly as I wanted to, wasn't scoring, and then get feedback from these guys cooking next to me 3 or 4 contests in a row. And I'm like, well, maybe I ought to try backing off just a little bit, right? You don't have the guts to go, a whole bunch, but you can take a couple of degrees off, and well, maybe my feeling of done is way overdone. I mean, maybe I like it too tender. You start playing those games, and so you can get into that. But yeah.
So we got a question here from the YouTube side. Most y'all keep a journal of cooks. Yes. Most of us, and I would probably say about 90% of us, keep a journal. It may be a journal, like he's got a paper copy journal. It may be like mine that is in Google Drives. I keep a spreadsheet of every cook I'm doing, and at the end of it, I put notes in the bottom of it I've got. A lot of people, it might be photos. I know a lot of people take pictures, and if you ever seen a barbecue cook's phone, whereas you think it would be a phone of girls on the beach, you'll see a phone full of chicken, ribs, pork, and brisket. It'll be insane about how many pictures on there. But what we'd also do on that is we might come in it, and in the description, some of the photos, you can write down notes. Mm-hmm. So if you go to the details of the pictures, you can write down notes there, or you can take a pen and put notes on top of it. And some people do an after action report video to themselves. So, but the answer to the question is yes. We all have a notes in of our cooks to see kind of like what was good and bad in our thought process. And then we get to the judging side of it, and we compare that with what the judges give us back. And sometimes they agree, and sometimes we don't agree. And Paul, you want to add to that?
Well, no, in fact, I just found what I was thinking about. So going into I think we were in, Brian and I were down in Bardstown, Bourbon Festival down there in Kentucky. And I made a note going into this one from kind of looking at the previous cooks, and I'd had, I came out of the gate killing pork, And then I went into like no calls. I mean, and more important than no calls, low scores, right? I'm like, that's weird. You know, I could just mail in pork and get a call, was what I felt like. Maybe it was overconfidence, but so I sat down and started to document things. And so I came into that contest with a Post-it sitting on there, you know, what to do for pork, right? Back off the finish temp, which we were talking about, you know, the finishing process, you know, the au jus, you know, hit the finish rubs, and then the au jus and the sauce back, you know, make sure you're consistent with what has worked. So I had a list of things for pork on that day to go do. That was my focus for that day. And I ended up second. I had the winning score, but I lost a tiebreaker to Continental that day in pork. And I was like, you know, all right, I feel good that I'm able to get a call in pork again. Because, you know, if you declare yourself a pork team or a chicken team, you know, when you go for a while without a call in your category, you know, you get a little nervous, right? Like what's going on? So, but yeah, no, temperature, time it went on the pit, humidity, right? I have not cooked at altitude or high altitude, I should say. So I don't have any of that data down, but things like that written down.
You know, so when we done a contest up there in the Virginia mountains, which is not high altitude Colorado style, but it's still relatively high elevation compared to what I'm cooking there on the coast in Myrtle Beach. So I'm at 0. They're up there at 4,000 feet. First thing I always do is get a pot out there and boil water. I want to find out what that temperature that water's boiling at. If that water, I think, was boiling at 202, or not 202, whatever it was boiling at, it was a few degrees off what I'm using. And so when I started doing that, I think it actually was 208. Now I said that. And so when I'm basically kind of keeping my pork, and at the time I was pulling my pork at 206. I'm not saying I'm the pork cook. I'm just using an example. I was pulling it at 206. So I backed it down 4 degrees and started checking it really hard at 202. I'm not saying that. I think the first day we actually won pork. Second day we probably shouldn't have cooked pork. But my point being that information is very critical in what you were saying as far as keeping elevation and stuff here. And humidity. Yeah. Humidity plays a factor, really, I think, on the type of smokers you're running. I think on the stick burners I was running, on the cabinet smokers I was running, with the water introduced into it, humidity plays a bigger factor because it'll create the air will be heavy and it won't come up into the upper chambers. I haven't really seen that much on the can cookers. I haven't seen that much.
I'm not much of a can guy. In fact, once again, following Brian and Brendan this summer, I moved off of my can and went over to a Traeger for chicken. So
yeah.
So yeah, and even there, do I know about the humidity in a Traeger? No, I don't. Right? But my chicken's in so much of a bath that I doubt humidity is going to be a problem for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got water into the smokers and stuff here, but to kind of get to the point is the elements play a factor. Wind plays a factor. Even if you're looking at your Traegers and the Recteqs, if that wind's coming in the backside of where that exhaust come out of, it's going to create the devil. So you got to take that in consideration. Always think about what's going on around it. It's going to affect it because you're not inside cooking in a stove. You're outside cooking in the elements where everything's going to happen. I remember the first cook I done was probably not first cook I did when I was already got into cooking. I think it was 2011. We done a little contest here at local church, and it was January. It was 32 degrees out here, and I mean it was just ice. And I had went through so much wood. I had ended up going to Harbor Freight and buying these welding blankets just to lay over the cooking chamber just to hold heat in it. And I wasn't necessarily doing it for the competition, but it was competing, but it was more for a charity for the church to raise money for the whatever they were doing at the time. But I told buddy of mine, I said, this is the last time I ever cook contest or cook at all in this situation without an insulated firebox. Because we was running out of wood. I mean, it was, luckily I was at the house. I come and get some, but it was just, it was losing so much heat because we didn't take the elements into account for the situation. And that does make a difference.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I'm over prepared, if anything, so I have at least 2 of everything, 2 fireboards, 2 blowers, 2, I don't have 2 pits of everything, right? I don't have 2 Traegers and 2 Jambo. I do have 2 Jambos, but I don't carry them with me. But, so of supplies, of charcoal, of starters, of anything I'm going to need, I probably got about 30 probes, the wired probes for the fireboard, 3 different fireboard controllers as a backup, so I'm ready for technology to screw me, right? And have a backup plan. So, but the only reason that I'm there is because I know it's happened, right? So I won't go into a contest knowing that, one thing could take me out. And, what I'm saying is that goes bad. I have a different approach.
So for the people out here, and most people watching the show are competition guys, but for the people out here that's not competition guys, you mentioned a Jambo.
Mm-hmm.
Explain what a Jambo is for somebody out here that don't necessarily know what that slang term is.
So it's a heavy son of a gun. And the Jambos are 1989 Jamie Gear came out with it, and they set the stage for the industry of stick burners for a while. You got your Langs, you got, now Jay Craig with Outlaw Smokers is just killing it. And, not only with quality, innovation, and price, customer service. I mean, so I know the Jamie's going to retire, and, he's probably already outpaced by Outlaw Smokers 2-1 everywhere now. But the Outlaw, it's a heavy firebox, insulated firebox. I'm going to guess probably about just under about 42 inches wide, the firebox, by 42 inches tall. So it's a beast, and thick steel chamber, 28. I think it's 28 back. It's huge, right? And it's got shelves. You can run. I don't know. I run 4 to 6 pork butts depending on how I'm cutting them for the contest. I'll run 4 or 5 racks of ribs, and then the chicken. You can run it on there. I put it on the Traeger, but it's you can do a whole comp. Many people do the whole comp on a Jambo. I now use the Traeger or a can for chicken and to finish stuff, and as a fail safe in case I need to push something at the very end, like brisket. if I deemed it to be done and it's a little tight at the end, boy, I can throw it into a pan and put that Traeger at 340 and push it, for 20-25 minutes if I have to. But yeah, so the Jambo it's a stick burner. I went from 21 to 22. I was probably 85% stick and the rest lump, to probably now 70% lump and 30% stick. So that was one of the changes I made this year.
So kind of going back to that smoker here. So the difference between the competition stick burner and also most of the YouTubers you see out there stick burners. Mm-hmm. And you see a lot of people out there, and we've been cooking on forever, so there's nothing wrong with it. But the difference is that the fire chamber, the difference is the fire chamber in the back of it is a little bit bigger, but it's insulated. Mm-hmm. And that heat is then what it's doing is forcing that heat from there to be controlled to go into a cook chamber. And then it's going out the other side. It's a direct flow. It's not reverse flow or anything else. Right. It's just coming out of here. It comes out, but it's in an insulated container, and it's pushing the heat out the other side, and it's going out the stack. That's the difference between the competition stick burners and most of the YouTuber side of it. So now when we start saying the Jambos, the Outlaws, the Champions got one out there. I think it's the 3 of them. Those are the 3 stick burners out there that's been used in competition for the last 15, 20 years. Langs out there. Who's the other one?
Yoder.
Sir?
Yoder.
Yeah, Langs and Yoders and some other ones out there. Those don't have, I don't know if the Yoders do or not. They don't have the insulated firebox. I know Lane doesn't. And so what happens is you end up using more wood or more charcoal to maintain a cook. And that's whenever the I wouldn't say advantages of it, but that's one of the reasons why the guy's going to a insulated firebox is because I look at the competition barbecue. When I'm doing barbecue, what I want to do is my meat go on there just like I have an oven. I want that to be this. I want that timeline, that temperature, everything to be just like this. If I start doing a roller coaster, what I've been introduced to so much of these up and downs, I can't control. I don't know what's going on in that cook chamber. And if I did get a perfect score, I can't repeat that.
Right.
Because I can't repeat those up and down. So what I want to try to do is keep it just steady, even. And so that's kind of where I say the advantages of the insulated firebox come into. Now, you can do that with a non-insulated stuff, but you got to basically sit there and cut a little chunk out and put it in there about every 5 minutes and see what's going on. But you can do it, but it's going to take a lot more work. Whereas the insulated, it doesn't seem to be quite so much that way.
Yeah, and I mean, and that plays in the factor when you're in, the two tails of temperatures, right? If you're out there on a 75-degree day, you're not going to have to worry. The non-insulated firebox is going to compete a lot better, right, on that day than when it's 25 to 30 degrees or even heavy wind. Here's the other key thing: rain, right?
Yeah,
rain on the outside of a pit, a non-insulated, thick steel will have a drastic effect, right? My very first cooker competition we used was a Good One smoker, the old Chris Marks Good One. It was a rodeo. I mean, you could house a ton of pork butts on there, but it was not very thick, steel, and you get a rain shower coming through there on the back of the firebox and on the cavity, you'd lose 20 to 30 degrees in an instant, right off the bat, boom. Right. And so now you're overloading it and trying to open up the dampers to get more heat. And to your point, those are variables that are going to be hard to repeat, even if you wanted to. Right.
Right.
Kind of what you're saying is, look, there are some variables in a cook that you can control and some you can't. You can't control the outside temperature, but you can control how you cook, in your chamber. And by buying a more insulated smoker, you're working to control that cook temperature by the amount of stick you put in there and the cold and lump and that. And so you got a choice, right? Some variables are very expensive to control, right? And buying a Jambo may not be in the game for everybody. So you're going to choose not to control the thickness of your smoker. But to your point, then you've got to manage that fuel. So, right off the bat, you're going to have less time paying attention to your meats because you're going to be paying more attention to the temperature.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of where you start looking into it. You got to control all the environments control in there. I know talking about guys, Dean was asking questions like, what do I cook on? So I started this in 2010 and was basically got into this to sell my smokers. And I found that that's not, without me having a lot more people working with me, rather me trying to keep it one man show, it wasn't feasible. So we ended up kind of getting out of that. My first cookers that I cooked on in the competition that I hadn't built was Gateway drums. And we started at, I think, 19. We started doing Gateway drums. Before then, I had been cooking on my stick burner, which was basically a clone of an Outlaw or a Jambo. And it was an insulated firebox and stuff. But even that, when I think back, it cost me $6,200 to build it myself. So, I mean, they're not cheap to build. And then now I'm cooking on the Gateway drums, Recteqs for the most part. That's what I use at competition. My Recteqs I love again, back to that story. I love the pellet smoker, the Recteqs. I keep it steady. I can turn it. I can hit that button. I can go up if I need to come down if I need to. So I take that equation out of it. And I feel like competition we've seen in the last couple of years is getting more and more of the pellet smokers into the equation. And it's getting to be because, yes, you can go buy a stick burner, and yes, you can buy a Jambo or you can buy a Lane. And yes, there's a difference between them. But you can also go there and buy a Recteq or you can buy a Traeger and come out there and you can still turn in really good food. I think the game change will ever be whenever they actually design a pellet smoker offset. If they could get that fire from out the middle of that smoker and put off to the side, so you got a pellet controlled offset smoker, I think that would be a game changer and a half.
Parrot Head, are you familiar with Parrot Head Barbecue? Usually out west, I think South Dakota, maybe Nebraska. But he shows up with 4 of the small Green Mountain grills, or he did this year a couple of times. I mean, he looks like he's ready to have a nice little backyard party. I mean, just they're not intimidating by any means, right? Mm-hmm. Comes out there and spanks people, you know, because it even keel, right? You know, he's got, I think he cooked 3 or 4 of them. I can't remember how many, but yeah, I mean, now he's had several, he's probably cooked 300 contests, you know, and I'm sure he's got more smokers than I'll ever have, but he's now, you know, he's using them just to manage the temperature. That's one variable he doesn't want to have to worry about.
I would say one of the biggest advantages of going to either pellet smokers or cans or independent cookers is that when you want to practice, you practice that one piece of meat. And I think that's one of the biggest, I wouldn't say a downfall, one of the biggest hurdles when you start doing what you're doing as far as a stick burner is you want to practice a brisket. You got to compensate for, okay, during my brisket cook, I've also got 3 or 4 Boston butts on here. During the end of it, my ribs are on here. All this stuff's going on. Whatever your timeline is, I'm not using it. I'm just using kind of hypothetical here. But when you start trying to recreate that practice on that brisket, it's really hard unless you're doing a full competition cook to really truly get a true practice on there. Whereas if you're doing a can or a pellet smoker to do each individual pieces, you want to cook a brisket, just cook a brisket. You can take your notes and it'll work. And I think that's one of the things that whenever we come in here and do it, if we're cooking and I know guys that do this, if we cook, we weigh everything. Some guys do, especially chicken. I say chicken's probably the biggest one that's been weighed all the time. So when they go put in every piece of chicken leg or chicken thigh, they got some weigh X amount. They will cook it on the smoker at the same time, and so they've got this thing down to a science. They've got it down to a science that meat's gonna come off at that time. So I think that's really cool when they can do that. I don't know that we can do that so much with pork and with brisket or ribs. I just think there's so much inconsistency throughout the years, whereas chicken's chicken.
Yeah, no, I know. I know a lot of your listeners on here now. I mean, with chicken, you know, it's again, what are the variables you're going to choose to control, right? The weight of the chicken, the shape of the chicken is absolutely something you can control, right? Now, you may have to buy 24 to 32 thighs to get what you want, but you can control that. Legs, same thing. You can control that. Right now, you know, you don't have to you don't have to go out and buy, you know, the same pork butts for the same thing. But chicken is really one of those that you can control, right? Thighs weight, thighs shape. You know, get a pair of scissors, trim them up to the shape you want. I know people that make templates for chicken thighs, right? You know, I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm saying it's one more thing you could do to control that, right? And you know, when I cook thighs, they're at 5.5, 5.4. You know, I don't want them under 5.2. If they look similar, I'll probably accept it, but I like them to be right at 5.2 to 5.5. And for when I'm cooking legs, I want them right at about 5.0 to 5.2. Legs are a little smaller. I've done better with a little bit smaller. Of course, some people call those big legs, but you know, that's, again, you can control the weight of chicken you put on. You know, it takes a little more trim time, but you can do that. Why wouldn't you, right? I'm not saying that's mathematically going to be always the best answer, because there was a contest this year where I actually put my comp chicken in the freezer and brought the leftovers accidentally. I switched the vac seal bags. And, you know, and of course you got to get out of your mental head that you just screwed the pooch, right? You're like, well, I blew this contest. Right, my chicken's going to be toast. So, but you find a way, right? You trim what you can. Now you got bigs and smalls in that bag, so you got 2 pans, and you know, and you're cooking to tenderness, regardless. You know, that's where you're. I got third in chicken that day. You know, I don't know that I deserve third in chicken, but to your point, you know, is that while we do everything to control all the variables, ultimately, still at the end of the game, there's still a bit of a crapshoot on there.
There is. I mean. And I think that's something other that, and all cooks have got frustrated, but about they're not getting results they expected. Totally get that. But we also always have to look at it from the other side of the coin. We've also gotten calls, like you said right now, in chicken. Whenever, quite honestly, you got a call on chicken that day, you may probably not deserve that, but your week before that, you didn't get a call on chicken, you probably deserved it. So you got to kind of yin and yang. It's going to wash itself out in the end. And I think that's kind of just a gut check. And I think one of the biggest things that really, truly just, I always look at my wife or whoever, I'm like, the people don't always cook perfect. I can tell you straight up, I don't cook every contest perfect. And so sometimes I don't do good because my food wasn't good. So I mean, it's also something other that we do as a cook. We have good days and bad days. I mean, we make mistakes, we don't make mistakes, and you got to take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah,
Dean.
I think if you cook a lot, you end up getting the 180 mentality, right?
Yep.
I know for chicken this year, I check tenderness of my chicken before I turn it in. That's how I decide which ones I'm going to turn in, right? And I'm using tweezers to feel the meat, right? And you can tell tenderness. You know, many people wouldn't want to do that just for the appearance issues, right? But you can't, right? And I know it was a little tight in a couple of contests. Just a little tight, you know. And then you come back after turn in and you try your chicken, and you can decide whether it was tight or not, right? And I still thought there was times when I was just a little more tight than I had wanted, and that negative is in your head going into ribs, right? Damn, I didn't get everything I left. I left points on the table in chicken, right? Well, two things. I have a 180 mentality now, right? I'm trying to turn in 180 every time. So, 178 will do very well at a contest, right? 175 will do very well. So you also got to get out of your own head that you're not going to turn in 180 every time, but you ought to strive to that. But don't let it work against you going into the next category. And there's quite a few times where I had to fight my own mental state out because, I know I wasn't turning in 180 chicken. Again, process. That's that, process to perfection. You got to be careful because if your goal is perfection, then you've already failed because you're not going to get 180, 180, 180, 180, right? Unless you're local yokels in Indiana, you're not going to get close to that.
Right. I mean, that's a great point. Dean, a couple of things about your question. I use a 380 and a 1250 for competitions and for YouTube videos. I've basically got one of each, and I use those to do that. I love the 1250. I love the 380 from a grill perspective. And I love it for kind of a low and slow and stuff here. But I will say this with 380. If you get the 380, make sure you do one thing. Always clean that sucker out. Straight up. The way it's designed, you make sure it's clean. And I'll say about any grill out there, but I will stress it with the 380 itself. It is something that you need to make sure you clean. Green Mountains are great grills. I mean, they've been around a little while. I heard they wasn't them and Traeger going through some stuff a while back. Is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think Traeger's on the Wi-Fi technology and the controller. I think there's some legalities there, and I personally don't know. You chat with Sterling Smith, you probably get the real deal behind the scenes. He knows all the isms at it, but yeah, I think Traeger is pressing a little hard on Green Mountain Grills. Hey, Steve.
But the 1250, I mean, seriously, the 1250 is a grill that I feel like is probably as the top notch grill for pellet smokers out there, and I say that with a lot of pride. I love them. I'm not saying nothing wrong with some of the grills. I'm just saying that 1250 is the way it's built in stainless steel. I had no problems with that bad boy. And you're right, Richard. A good cook does know his stuff, and that's one of the things about it is you know it's good, but at the end of the day, we're not the ones judging this food. We have to understand that what we think is good and what we think is great, what we think is perfect, is maybe not what's getting in there. And I believe this year with the judging, I think this has been a kind of a transition year. And I think what happened early in the year is COVID was just stopping. So we still had the judges from last year that was judging while COVID was going on, come out there in the COVID guidelines. I think they were doing it the first half of the year. I think through the middle of the year, through the summertime, is that transition between those judges still judging and then the old judges that wasn't judging come back into the mix. So I think we had a little bit of a transition with that. And I feel like the third part, the last quarter year, whatever, I feel like the fuel prices kind of took some of the judges that have been judging last year and year in the early year, kind of brought them out, took them out of the equation. And so I think we've had a transition year. And I think if you look at the scores as a whole, I think you'll see from a lot of teams that's had their stuff dialed in for COVID, had their stuff dialed in 2021 and going in 22 and come out the gate swinging really good. And then about the middle of the year, I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? What's going on here?
Yeah,
And then
you're saying the heavy smoking ghost story right there. We
and
both did midsummer, and we weren't dead, but we weren't top three.
mhm. And I feel like that I'm not saying nothing's wrong with that. There's absolutely that's just the nature of the beast. I mean, we get into this, but it's not. And at the end of the day, I'm looking at. I'm like, that's the only thing I can figure out is that's the only thing that's changed because I went a couple of times and talked with some judges and judged turkey or whatever, and I'm like, I remember I was judging turkey and they like, well, this first contest we judged in 2 years. I'm like, okay, well, I have no idea what you want what you want it to taste like tomorrow, but hey, we want to try it anyhow. Um, so I have answered this question. So, and I don't want to make anybody upset. So, but let me get into this answer for this. And this kind of what I talk about as far as going to another part of the conversation would be KCBS as far as doing research about selecting the board members. So here's what I'll say about J Cup. I think that J Cup is absolutely amazing. I think it's got a lot of good points to it. I think it's going to do a really wonderful job. However, when you have this J Cup right here, and what you have in there is a percentage of the judges that's doing the J Cup, a percentage of judges not doing the J Cup, and then you come out here and you go to a contest and you put them all in a hat and you pulling out a chip, you have no idea what's going on. If you're going to do what you're going to do, then number one, if you're going to keep these not mandatory, then it's not mandatory. I would suggest you try and do it mandatory, but I understand the political side of it. But what I do not understand is put the computer seeding program back into place. Because what you'll do now is you'll find out these people are taking this class, and you can see their scores of how it's going to change. And the people that hasn't taken class, you can see their scores, how it is, has or has not changed. And then you'll find out, okay, I need to put this person with this person on the table, and then these people on this table together. So at the end of the day, my table averages are averaging out as what it's supposed to be. Now we've got an even playing field. But whenever you've got the J Cup and you have no computer seeding program and it's about luck of randomness right here, then I don't get it because, I mean, that doesn't, to me, that makes no sense. You're going through all this effort to make it better, and do it better. And I commend you for what you're doing, but you're cutting your knees out from under you.
Yeah, Jason, you hit on a deep subject of mine. I was on the J Cup team that developed the training, and my passion to get on there was a pair of sixes and brisket for burn ends, right? Well, actually, it should be two pairs of sixes, right? I was at Warsaw, and next to Rub My Rack and Stan, who's now our president, I was waiting to be the last guy to turn in brisket, just one of the things I like to do. And I really, really thought the burn ends were on that day. And I had them try it before, I already had the box ready to go. And, I could yank them out the last minute if I really thought they weren't there, but I really thought they were there. Again, I love burn ends, so I'm not the best judge, right? Even on my own side. Stan hit it, and he's like, wow, tenderness is spot on. I ran the box, right? And I got not only one judge that gave me a pair of sixes, but two judges that gave me a pair of sixes, and it was too fatty, And so from then on, I was motivated to make a difference, right? So Dave Drutzler, one of the reps, got me on the committee. I had to send emails to people saying, hey, I really want to do this. Here's my background, blah, blah, blah. I have a math degree. I'm a statistics guy. Let me blah, blah, blah. But I really wanted to revamp. And in the end, I wanted to make a lot of changes. We made some changes, right? But we talked about burn ends for the first time, right? In the past, nobody talked about how to judge a burnt end, right? So kind of and I wasn't the guy that wrote the final words. We had people that do English much better than I. My comments kind of in pseudocode was, I don't care if you don't effing like fatty burn ends, right? I don't care. Burn ends contain fat, get over it, right? Your job as a judge is to determine how well the cook rendered out that fat. Okay, so regardless whether you like that slice or that meat selection, that muscle selection or not, I don't care. So we really focused on that, and again, there was a lot of good people on that team that really helped me bring that to the table, and that was Charles was the one that drove that. So that team led by Charles, is the one that delivered that J cup. And I agree with you. It's kind of like at Caterpillar when I was working there. We'd have safety stuff, and I'd have to take certification on certain things before I could go get into the shop and do move a fork truck, because they had to make sure that I was trained to be safe and to manage the work ahead of me and the process. So the J cup to me is nothing more than today's modern society assuring people are on the same page. Now, we had just removed the scoring, of the lower scores. So we actually had a different measurement system. So you couldn't let people just come in with no knowledge. Well, how do you retrain everyone, before they cook the next contest without doing it in the tent? You got to have something that shows them, hey, we removed these two numbers because they weren't being used. So we want to make sure you understand how to actually score now that we got rid of the 4 and the two lower numbers. And so that was the impetus behind the J cup, right? Is we had a scoring system change, and we want to get people on the same page. So for me, that was kind of I got the opportunity to kind of take my passion for burn ends, which I swear to God, I rarely turn them in. Even though I was the one pushing so hard for burn end judging, the key is I don't want to get it. I want it to be able to stay there, so that when we get back, I can relax and turn in burn ends when they're on point. Pardon the pun.
Well, it kind of first before we answer the questions here, talking about burn ends. I think if you do a burnt end from a prime brisket, that burn ends will render out fat, and that's what the judges are looking for as far as a rendered out burn end. And that's what I think is really truly what burn end. That's what it is. But when you start going to a black grade, gold grade A9, that fat in that burnt point is different than a fat in a prime. We pay a lot of money for this fat, but in your point, it doesn't render out the same way. Therefore, that you're gonna have that collagen taste in that A9 and the golds and the black standards, more the golds and the black than you are from a prime. So I think that's the situation is, and I think that's kind of what is causing a lot of problems. Because I've seen guys turn in actually beat me at Banjo BBQ. He turned in a box of just nothing but burn ends. Got a 180 and won the contest. But it was a
right? LC does that a lot.
Yeah, LC done that, but he had it rendered out. I don't know if it was a prime or if it was what it was. I never really talked to him about it, but I'm just saying that's what happened there. So he can win the contest, but I think when you start looking at it, you got to understand how these two pieces of meat are different in that perspective. Yeah. Because I love cooking blacks. Before COVID, I love cooking blacks because I felt like I got a lot of the consistency with the flats from the Snake River Farm black grade. A lot of the consistency of the Wagyus with the flats, but also you have some of the prime consistency in the point that I can get good burn ends out of it. I think COVID, the way they couldn't process them and they're still trying to come out of that, I think some of this is a little bit different now. The beef we're getting here, especially the point side of the brisket, is a little bit different. We're getting some huge briskets right now. So I feel like there's still some stuff we're kind of working through on that we're going to just keep doing.
Let me tie this back to your question about the tables and the table program. The previous seating program, the program itself was cumbersome for reps. I'm not going to argue that, because it had to be done in advance. And when they get there, it's a spreadsheet. We know not every rep is a technology spreadsheet expert. Today it's better than it was 10, 15 years ago, but so that was a bit of a process issue in itself, right? So what happens when 3 judges don't show up? Now you've got, you got to do retrofit. So, put a lot of pressure on the reps, right? And then the data going into it was not clean because a lot of our back end systems weren't clean, right? So David McAllister, he's actually one of the guys being nominated to retain a board position. He's got that data now. He's got it in good working order. Okay. So I'll call it the pseudo code, the logic to do exactly what you're talking about is there. Right. Yep. And you can even deal with judges that have never been in a contest before, because now you can randomly dispense those, the 6th judge at every table could be the same standard random, no data for judge 6 on every table. Now it's even. right? Doesn't mean that those judges will be even, but their history of data is evenly distributed, right? So we have the pseudocode to do that. Right now, the actual score program, the module that actually runs all the contests and that is antiquated. I mean, it's written in one of the libraries it's written in was in Windows CE, so that, I somewhere in here I had I do have it still here. I have an old kind of Palm Pilot that was on Windows CE. That shows you how old, right, the technology we have in our base score program. So, we want to put a bolt on for the seeding program. We got the ability to do it, but it's almost like saying we're going to build on, a game room, or I guess for us, a barbecue room for our filming, and maybe some bourbon room next to that. But we're about ready to bolt it onto an 1800 structure that isn't sound, right? I mean, so before we go do that bolt on, we've got to fix the score program, right? We got to go back, reverse engineer the requirements, and make sure just the basics that we already have and take for granted are good. So everybody, I shouldn't say everybody. That's a really sore subject, actually. I think those that are technology inclined understand you got to fix the score program and you want to put the bolt on, right? Which would be the seeding program. And I think those two things with the J Cup, make a cook's world as good as it can get, right?
Well, I think that I know technology's out there. I personally don't know how to program it, but I know what's out there is that you can take a phone, put a KCBS app on your phone, and judge gets there, they click in, they check in on the phone, and at the back end of it, it can sit there and does its own seeding program, and then it sends out the notification to the rep and say, all right, this judge is sitting here. I mean, yes, they can do that. The technology is out there because people do it all the time. And so you can do it that way. So therefore, it takes the cumbersome out of the reps equations. It is before they're not doing it. It takes the situation about saying, well, I got to do this ahead of time. Well, no, if the person's en route and they've 10 minutes out and they call in and say, okay, we're coming, we're here, they check it out. If not, you got your secondary judge right there. You say, hey, you need to sign in. Or it could be the fact is that those that sign in and show up, then they get put for judging on there. And you're right, Kerry. I mean, you kind of said right here about just giving to use it. I mean, I think Ghost should run.
Run away.
I think it'd be run away. But I mean, that's it. Now, Noel said here about more contests, more teams, more judges moving around. I think that's a lot of truth in that. I absolutely 100% do that. In the Southeast where we cook at, we tend to have one contest up and down from Florida to the Mid-Atlantic up in the north. We don't have 2 or 3 contests to split up teams. So I know over here we see a lot of the same judges every weekend, which is great. Don't get me wrong. I love seeing everybody. I think you get out towards Kansas City area in the middle of the country, I usually have a little more than 1 or 2 contests judging. But the fact of the matter is, I don't know if we have enough teams to truly sustain more than 1 or 2 contests on the weekends on a consistent level. And I don't know what's going to happen next year, like I said, with fuel and meat and stuff. Richard here. So this is a comment here in regards to scoring that I'm probably of a different camp than most people out there. Let me give you an example on that. I done a contest early in the year, and I was doing a brisket. I had 5 slices of brisket that I felt was absolutely perfect, and they were really good. But I could not find a 6th slice of brisket. So what I done is I put that 6th slice at the back so that heat could hold it in and maybe help it out a little bit. I should have probably put it in the middle of it, but I put it in the back, and I put it over in the front of it, and I got my score sheet back. And my score sheets was right across the board. 5 really good scores, 9 9s and 9 8 9s, all across the boards. There's one at the end of it was probably a 7 8 or 8 8 8 or whatever it was. So it was not good. So whenever we're looking at this, we got to take this into consideration with chicken. You have a chicken and put it in the pan. This one piece of chicken is going to be a different spot in that pan with this, and the fire's going to hit it different. So it's going to cook a little bit differently. Only way you can do that is do like Child's and put a rotisserie, and even rotisserie has its own little quirks to it. But that's kind of the point is every piece of meat in there, ribs, chicken, pork and brisket, everything's going to be done. It's going to taste differently. You go into a rib. I mean, if I could get you 6 bones out of two very middle bones out of each rack of ribs and turn in 6 of those 2 bones, I do it every day of the week. But one rack's going to taste different from the other ones, and it's going to taste different from end to end. So I'm going to start putting it in there. So to kind of say what you're saying right here is I would take that with a grain of salt in the sense that sometimes not perfect. Now, we sometimes it turn in, it should have been 999, but we don't know what a judge is looking for. So I will take up for the situation that kind of a retrospect looking back at that, it might not be totally the best food ever turned in. That being stated, if you got 6 of the perfect ribs, as I should have all got 999s, you got one off, and you need to look at probably if you look at that judge's average. If that judge's average is a 22 or 23, then okay.
Yeah,
you got somebody here that
story right there.
he needs to be coached a little bit. But I always kind of look at it from both sides of the equation. Like sometimes it's not totally the judge's fault. Sometimes it's not totally the cook's fault, but sometimes it's either or's fault.
Well, and even with the like a 787 on there, and trust me, I've had my fair share of 179.44 in brisket, right? And I just shake my head. I'm like, what did 5, of those judges see in appearance that last guy did not, right? But when I get that, I'll call it bad score, whether it's 7, 7, 7, and the rest are 9s, or 8s or whatever. The first thing I look at is that appearance score, right? Because if you think about it, the appearance score should be the least subjective, right? Taste is going to be the highest subjectivity. And we actually train better today now on tenderness with the J cup and that. So I would say your highest variability is going to be in taste. The second highest would be in tenderness, although it should be markedly less. And your least variation should come in appearance. So if I look at that score and I've got 9s in appearance and that 7 is sitting there in appearance, it's almost like I don't even give that judge credibility, right? Because I got 5 judges that say it's 9. Now, if it's an 8, I don't even move, right? It's like, yeah, okay. I mean, 8, 9, it's left to center 1, I can't argue that. But when you're statistically different than 5 other judges on appearance, that's the one area that I personally have a problem with. And we can do things on there in the future, in training, we can put boxes up that we've had 100 master judges go through and rated them. So we know the statistical truth of that box based on 100 master judges. We can put it out there for the training of judges. And when they put a 7 on there, we could have the hand come up and say, please tell me why that's a 7, right? I'm not saying we fix the judge, but we give them the answer as to why the master judges said that. It's continuous improvement. But for me, when I look at that oddball that Richard put up there, I look for the appearance score. And if it's, 2 off, then I toss that judge out. Right.
Well, I would say that we all look at it from that perspective. Like this person's one outlier. But at the same time is if you get a comment card and this guy'll give you a 7 appearance and he puts on there, he says, I seen it was too dark for my taste or whatever. At least give me information to justify you got it. If you're gonna give me a 7 in something, and you don't know what everybody else is scoring at table. So your score is your score. Mm-hmm. You have no idea that you getting he's giving all 9s, but you getting that 1 7. I get that. Been in that situation. But if you can give a 7 on there, again, I would say explain it and own it. But at the same time, I would give the judges kind of a, let me say it differently here. 3 or 4 years ago, you come to a contest and you can average about 172, 173, you win a contest. If you were averaging above 170 at the contest 2 or 3, 4 years ago, you were, it was 698. You were winning a contest. Right now, we're at, 704, and you coming in second. And I get it that the food is there's information out there, people cooking a lot better food. I get that, but at the same time, sometimes I think we give away nines like candy, and sometimes we give away a seven's what probably should have been given away, but it's really hard to go there.
I cringe when I hear a judge say, "Well, I know they traveled, they put a lot of money in here, so I gave them an 8." I'm like, no, you don't give them anything. They earn the score, right? Yeah. And okay, so don't give them a 5. If it's bad and you don't like it, and it's below average, right? Then give them a 6. Don't give them a 7 because you try. No, I'm just as mad at a judge if I hear him say that as I am a judge that gives me the 7 in appearance when every other judge gave me 9. Those were equally offensive to me, right? Because I don't want to get a score I didn't earn, nor do I want the person who didn't earn it to get points that, I didn't get.
And what I will say is this: we greatly appreciate all the judges come out and judging contests. We really do want that. And what I've said this in the past is look at this as far as giving a test score. If you give a math, you're a math professor, a math major. If I go here and do a math test, I get the end of it, and you come up and you say, you got a C. You keep walking. You look at me like, what you mean I got a C? How'd I get a C? We're not going to give you no information about that. You just didn't get an A. Then I'm going to be like, okay, well, how am I going to improve on it next time? So when you look at comment cards, and I get that everything's fast paced, and I totally understand that. And I wish that there was a little bit easier way for KCBS to get the comments to the teams that could allow information to pass through there. And I don't know how to do that. And I'm not going to try to get an argument today. But what I'm saying is if you can help them get that information, then they can improve their game for next time and keep moving up the equation. So please don't give scores just to be kind and generous in the sense that let them earn the scores. But until we do the seeding program, until we do J-Cup across the whole, all of this here is going to pretty much be a ring around the roses and keep talking about this issue in circles.
And Jason, to your point, it's much like your child coming home with a test and they got a 70% on it. And you say, well, what did you miss? Well, I missed 30%. Well, which ones? Well, they didn't tell me which ones I missed. How do you get better? Right? It's, somebody said the math test, what we do in the old days, we'd circle the problem, we give you the correct answer, and we give it back to you. Right? Yep. So in my mind, if you want me to get better, oh, by the way, if I get better, you get better food. So, it goes both ways. And my frustration, and I started turning in money only, and those that know me know that's not like me, right?
Not dollar bills.
Yeah,
for people not competing right here.
Get turned in with dollar bills around it in an ancillary, and they were not DQ'd. For pork, there was a couple of times I got so frustrated, I just turned in money because I would get a 7, and I have no idea whether it was the tubes or the money because I got no feedback.
All right, so kind of breaking this down a minute. What he's talking about is pork. And for those that's not competition guys here, going to give a quick lesson. Anytime you're doing a pork Boston butt, you pick a Boston butt up. You put on this side here, you're going to have a bone. Where that bone is, that there is what we call the horn meat. All right, in the middle of it, on the opposite side of that is a piece that you'll see the striations that run up and down like this. That's the money, which is money muscles we're talking about. In the middle of that, between the two, you've got what they call the roast. All right. In between the roast and the money muscle, there's 2 tubes that run across here. And that's what we're talking about with the tubes. And then on the bottom of that, if you take it and flip it over, so now you put the fat cap up. Underneath the fat cap, you got bacon here. And then you also have a tube about the size of your finger that'll run a long ways across there. Little small tubes. So I got a video out there if you want to see a more breakdown, but it's kind of when he says money, he's talking about the money muscles part of a Boston butt. Sorry. Yeah. Paul.
No, and cooks cook them like a medallion, like a mini filet mignon, but when you put two anything in the box, right? And this is the argument that comes back on brisket, right? Some people turn in slices and burn ends, and why would you turn in burn ends? Why are you rolling the dice? Well, the first question I ask them, I go, what do you do for pork? Well, I turn in money muscles and I turn in some pulled. Well, you're turning in two meats, 2 muscles, and pork, but yet you don't do it in Brit. I mean, it's a double standard, right? But we all know that the subjectivity on burnt ends is much higher than the subjectivity on the second pork, right? So, and it's kind of, it goes back to statistics. So, right, if you have two things in the box, it's two things that can go wrong, or said positively, that's two things you got to get right as opposed to one thing you got to get right. So the opportunity for failure is larger with more you put in the box.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's what Law's doing. Richard, I mean, that's the thing about it. You got a comment card on it. What I would probably say is you just, I would throw it in the fire pit, and I would go by the rule of threes. Yeah. When you start talking about this here, I would try and look at the rule of threes. If you get the same comment from 3 different contests, then I would say there's something going on there. I know a couple of, I think probably about a year or so back, there was an injection for brisket. I'm not going to name it, but I was using it. I kept getting the comment card, unknown flavor, unknown flavor. And I was talking to a couple of other people, and they were like trying to figure out kind of what this was, because they were getting the same question, same comment. And we was like, what's going on with it? We found that this one injection we were using, that it was kind of getting this little bit of a unknown flavor. It was putting in all of it, because it's the only thing we're using common across the board. And we found that for whatever reason, it was just that mix was off or whatever was off, and it was kind of creating unknown flavor. But once we started doing that, then like I said, rule of 3, we figured out what it was. We moved away from it, and all of a sudden the brisket scores at the time was going back up. And I don't know if he's changed it or if it's what it was, but anyhow.
Well, I mean, and there's some judges that like a smoky, maybe even a dirty smoke. You know, there are judges that, I mean, this is what they like.
You know, I get a comment card every time when I usually don't put it in the box unless I'm just screwed up the entire world, and that's all I got to put in the box. It's just pulled pork. We done it one time this year because whatever reason, it just didn't work. So I had pulled pork, and I had the money muscle. So I put the money muscle in there and pulled pork. I got a comment card, and it said, "Thank you for the pulled pork. We never get pulled pork." I'm sitting going like, really? If you want just pulled pork, man, we can make your life easy all day long. It would make tearing apart a pork butt a whole lot easier for turn ins.
Yeah, it would.
I mean, it's crazy. Yeah, I tell you, I love cooking them here. I got some in the refrigerator.
I cook the burn ends just for the au jus now, to have the extra au jus.
I do that myself. And to keep my smoker with back to what we're talking about with cooking is keep my smoker consistent, what I practice on. That's what I do it. Paul, how did you get into cooking?
So I led off with the home of the IBC Gray Ghosts, right? That's the high school here in Chillicothe, Illinois. And my son was out for soccer, and, you know, at least in the Midwest, you know, of course, we got World Cup going on right now, but there's boys football, which is at the top of the football chain, even in the Midwest. I know all the way down south, same thing. And at the bottom of the boys sports is boys soccer. And it's a tie with boys swimming and boys soccer around here. Or at least that's the way the athletic director conveyed it where I live, right? Then begins the girls sports, right? So then, you know, at the bottom of the girls is the girls soccer and the girls swimming. So kind of had this hierarchy of sports. And the reason I say that is you could look at the funding for these sports and the athletic clothing and equipment, and it was, you have the safety equipment for football, which makes it expensive. Don't get me wrong. I love football, right? But when you looked at this, I'm like, well, this isn't right. These shorts looks like Speedos on the kids. So I went into the athletic booster and said, hey, you know, my son looks like he's out for the swim team. Nothing wrong with the swim team, but he's on a soccer field, you know? And it was a he and a han. And, you know, I'm like, well, we'll go raise the money ourselves. If you guys ain't going to do it, we'll get soccer shorts that look right. You know, we want to be proud of the way our kids play and look. And they kind of said, no, hang on. So the president at the time pulled me aside and said, we'll get you the shorts. We'll find a way. You know, could you, rather than go create another splinter group, work with the concession stand at the booster club? And so that's where we ended up in the concession stand. Well, within a couple of months, we ended up being in charge of the concession stand. So that hook was set pretty good. And the first thing we sat around here is, well, how much money are we making? And there weren't really any books other than gross, receipts. So we started looking at, well, what's the big seller was the ribeye, and it was good. It was really good. But, it was like back at the time, the ribeye sandwich was like $9.80 a pound for the ribeye, to make a per pound for the ribeyes. And we're slicing them into sandwiches. I'm like, man, there's not that much margin here.
All right, wait, time out a minute here. At y'all's home football games and concession stands, y'all's concession was selling ribeyes?
They were.
Okay. Well, those are hot dogs and nacho cheese. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, and the sad part, I was the asshole that got rid of it, right? Nobody likes me, right? Because, man, what happened to those great ribeyes? Those are great. What happened to them? Well, we're not making money for that. We got to charge $10. We're going to sell you a ribeye sandwich. So I kind of sat down. We went through the menu and the pork chops at the time were a little like hockey pucks. So we bought a tenderizer, put them in twice to get them nice, put them in some Schweppes, put a little rub on them, and, just cooked them on the grill. And I mean, a world of difference, right? A twice tenderized pork chop is moist, and it's not a hockey puck. And people are like, oh, So, all of a sudden we started to see the margin going up. We made $100,000 in our first year in the concession stand, gross receipts. So all of a sudden we got the attention of people. And during that off season, it's like, well, it says here there's a higher margin on pulled pork. Who knows how to do that? And I look around the room and nobody raised their hand. And it's like, well, then I'm equally as talented, I guess. So I bought a electric smoker box and started playing around with that. And one thing led to another. And I got a good one, big old rodeo, so I could do 20 pork butts for the football, and of course that's big enough to cook a contest. And so that's where we started, right out of the concession stand.
Are you still doing it?
We vac seal it. So I went out and got the food safety and got my licensing and all that stuff. And we vac seal it and we give them the process to bring it back. But yeah, I still provide. I don't serve it. Most of the football games I can't even watch because I'm prepping in a barbecue trailer somewhere. So
yeah,
but yeah, and then we still do provide the meat. So
that's pretty awesome. I mean, it's got to help out your sports and your team a lot. Your local high school sports association.
Well, and that goes to our nickname. So, I was thinking, and again, I am not a marketing guy, and that it just drips off of me that I'm not. So I thought we're from Chillicothe, and we got a big gravel pit right near us, right? And there's a lot of minerals right by the river. So, there's a lot of, mining going on there. So I'm like, well, Chili Pit, get it? We've got a barbecue pit. We're from Chili Pit. That'd be our barbecue team name. We'll be the Chili Pits, right? Everybody looks at me and, you get that reaction of nothing, right? Which kind of tells you it's a bad idea. But it was my idea. It's going to be my team. So I'm like, it's got to be right. And I had a buddy look at me and go, why don't you call yourselves the Smoking Ghosts? And I was like, yeah, all right. Begrudgingly, I went with that. But I thought, it was more double entendre that we're from Chillicothe. We have a barbecue pit, and we're known for gravel pits, so we'd be the Chili Pits. Yeah. So yeah, someday I'll enter a contest under that name just for the hell of it.
Nah, you need to put your rub out with that name.
Yeah,
chili-based rub.
Yeah.
Chili Pit rub.
I did practice some Texas chili this winter so far. So
that'd be a good name for a chili rub.
Well, Mark from the barbecue store got me started on some. It was the Oak Ridge product that's going to be out of circulation. They have a chili mix there that was really good. So I started playing around. So
I tell you what, right now it's a race on to create a replacement for their chicken Game Changer. I mean, I know about 4 or 5 people.
I saw Brad's doing it. I've started to do it. I haven't spent significant money yet, but I'm on the border of doing some development, and I got to decide right now, to your point, is this, is there a reason to, right? They're going to leave a huge void. They already have. I've got enough for half a season in my cabinet. But, so I've got time, but, it isn't in my wheelhouse to have that product at this time. So if somebody else has a product that's, going to meet what I need, so I'll probably back off. But yeah, I've heard of two. Who else? I mean, obviously, Brad's one of them. Who else you heard of?
Well, I said right here, Sterling's is as well. I know Brad's working on it, and
Everybody's out there chasing it.
I mean, grapevine. It's not my place to spread that. I just know that there's different people out there working on different versions of it. So to see what happens with it, it's gonna be interesting to see. But at the same time, I mean, everybody's putting these out there. It may not. One of them take off. All of them may not take off.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a little bit interesting to see. It's more drama in the barbecue world.
We need more products. You know that.
Yeah, I've been trying to work on getting mine out there. Just not necessarily. I do want to use competition, but more from a branding situation for the YouTube side of it, because that's kind of what we kind of geared our stuff in here lately is YouTube videos. Speaking of which, if you watch this video, give us a thumbs up on there. Also subscribe to our channel. We greatly appreciate that. And if you got any ideas what you want something other cooked, send me a message on it. I've been pretty easy to get a hold of, but I'm always looking for something new to cook on there. Did you grow up cooking like at the hunting clubs with the family, or did you just kind of baptism by fire in the concession stand?
Baptism by fire. I mean, I went and I don't know, it was 2017 maybe. I went into Chris Marks to his class in Chicago, where he did pork and brisket. And that's where I ended up getting a good one. I'm like, boy, I like the size of it. I can cook a whole bunch of pork butts at the high school. That was kind of the goal there, was to learn that. That's where I got. So it was pretty much baptism by fire. But yeah, we're doing everything, watching the YouTubes. We were, Dr. Pepper injections. We were straining, we were all over the place, right? There had to be the right recipe, right? And, the right recipe, not many, so we were all over the place. And I came out of, ironic because I have sauces now, but if you have to put sauce in your barbecue, it must not be that good. So I'm going to say probably the first 4 contests we entered, there was no sauce on anything.
Yeah. And I get where you're coming from, like you said, but I think kind of what I tell people now is, if you have to put sauce on what I give you, then I haven't done it right.
Right.
My food might have some sauce on it. Now, if you want to add ketchup to it, then do your thing. I'm not going to judge you for it. I just won't give you no discount to it either, but kind of a humorous side of it. So how'd you get into making your own sauces and rubs and stuff?
Well, the rub was actually coming out of the concession stand. We had a rub that was good, but wasn't overly all-purpose. And so after a first few comps with brisket, I thought, well, maybe it's the flavor. And this is one of those cases where, like Heavy Smoke, he's a world champion, comes out and he takes his product to the market after he's a world champion. Well, here's a guy that has a product and he hasn't even had a call at a barbecue contest, right? So let's just say there's a hard way to do something. There is an easy way to do something. And I probably took the insane path. But, started working on something, had the buddy test, then went out to our culinary students, got feedback, and kept tweaking it left and right. And it was really intended to be a steak and brisket rub. And eventually I went to Excalibur in Pekin, Illinois, and said, here's what I got, knowing nothing, right? And what I was assuming is they'd give me something that was almost as good as I gave them, right? And in reality, they made it like 50% better. And it goes from the factors that all their ingredients are much fresher than mine.
Yeah.
Their ability to be consistent is much better than me. So when I got the first sample back, even though it wasn't what I wanted, I was like, wow, and within 6 months, we got what I wanted. And I submitted it into the National Barbecue Association. And eventually I submitted into the seafood category. And, I was correcting people. You're using it on the wrong products, right? Have you used it on, yeah, there's Dan. Have you used it on corn? I go, guys, it's a steak and brisket rub. Have you used it on salmon? Guys, it's a steak and brisket rub. So again, am I a marketing guy? No, I'm correcting my customers, right? Yeah. I mean, marketing is a journey, and you learn on the way. And I'm probably a really good coach from the mistakes I've made. But it won the seafood category at the National Barbecue Association. And I'm like, okay, I got to change the label from steak and brisket to all-purpose rub. So that's how that rub came out. It was really my attempt to improve my taste scores in brisket. And it's really before I took any, competition brisket class, and which would end up being Travis Clark's class. And and I took his class and ran his script for about 7 contests, because my attitude is, if you take a class, you got to give it worth its salt. You got to try it, and if you've done 100 to 200 contests and you've been there, okay, maybe not. But if you're a newbie like me with like 8 contests under your belt and you take a class like that, your best bet is to try to run it. Even if you don't like it, try to replicate it to prove that you can do that. And then once you got that process down, then start making changes about what you like and taste in that. So I kind of did that, and I committed that I was going to try and replicate his cook. And I'm not Travis Clark by any means, but I got to the point where I really have never liked that his beer wrap at the time. I don't know what he's doing now, but he had a beer wrap that I didn't like. And so I finally, the 8th cook, I switched to using my rub alone, and I got a first place brisket call. And I'm like, okay, so it's like, now I'm ready. But that was the rub story. The sauce came from a buddy of mine, the original PBQ, Eric Babb, was getting out for many reasons. I won't go into that. He was getting out of the sauce industry, and his products had won at the National Barbecue as well. And, he was here in Peoria, had moved down from Chicago to Peoria, and we'd hung out a bit, and we talked about that, licensing, all this. And he finally said, here, just buy it. So I did, and I took it from a co-packer up near Chicago, and chatted with some of my buddies in the sauce industry. Ended up at Country Bob's down in Centralia, and we did a bunch. Again, remember my statistical background means I'm a little overly anal, so we were doing blind tests, double blind tests, triple, doing all these things to make sure. And I was bringing Eric back into the conversation, because as much as you want to replicate a recipe, you absolutely don't. And so if you're going to vary, you want the variation to be good, not bad, right? So it's okay to change it as long as it's in the direction you want to go. And that's kind of what ended up. I'd say we're in the 90 percentile of what Eric had. We tried to be, but there is some variation there just from the different co-packer, and it's plastic. But that came from PBQ, was the sauces, the spooky sweet and the haunted heat.
It's really crazy about how you can change the bottle on that stuff, and it'll change the flavor.
Yeah, and the other key thing with the bottles, especially rub, is light. A lot of people will say, I was going to get your rub, but it looks bad. And that'll happen to a rub if you've got a lot of light exposure. The closets back there where all my rubs are at, they're closed, they're dark, right? It really won't over a short period of time affect it, but over a long period of time, absolutely will.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something other. I know whenever I'm making, I got like a SPG I use on a lot of stuff I cook around here, and I don't make it until I go to use it, because if not, the garlic in it will cake, and it'll just clog up on me. So I mean, I just make SPG salt, pepper, garlic, but I mean, you have to basically make it right when you use it. Now it's crazy it won't cake here. Once you mix them 3 together, it's like it's going to turn into a basketball.
Do you vacuum seal it?
Sir?
Do you vacuum seal it for the journey?
No, I just use it here. I don't use it at competitions. No, what I do at competition is I buy the small bottles, and what I've started doing is that bottle's going to run for 2 or 3 weeks. Then I'm going to take it and then move it to probably either my YouTube side of the world or the catering side of it. And because it's still good, It's still good flavor, but it's not. It's sometimes it's lost that wow factor.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's. I tasted one the other day that I had in the cabinet for probably a year and a half, and I remember that, and it was not supposed to be a real salty one, but it's like over time, the other ingredients break down and the salt stays because salt's a rock. So salt's not going to break down like pepper will or anything else. So over time, a rub gets more and more salty, in my
Yeah.
opinion. But crazy world.
Yeah, and I mean, what I do we get a lot of I mean, not that you guys don't. We get a lot of humidity in July around here in August, and if I have a double and it's on the road, I will vac seal some of the rubs for day two. I'll do it even in the bottle, right? I mean, if the bottle is already open, right? Because those, as much as you want to believe those lids are going to protect you, you get 90% humidity, they're going to kick up. So.
Yep.
Unless you're opening a new bottle for everything. And even then, from cold to hot, you got air conditioning and then the heat, you're going to get a little bit of that. But no, we got fortunate that, we got some good teams on our barbecue team we sponsor. And, the product has won more than I have in these national contests. And that's okay. I'd rather lose to my products than anyone else. But, and then, you've got, like Scott Nardi, not that anyone in steak uses one rub. We're in his cocktail. And then, Triple H, when they won the Royal last year, we're in their cocktail as well. So I think people would be surprised to find out how much I use of my rub on ribs and pork. If I'll leave it a little bit anonymous, but if you knew Steve Hayden in 1-2 Barbecue and the rub he uses in pork a lot, well, that's now augmented with Smoking Ghost. So there's your hint for those that have taken Steve Hayden's class.
I tell you, talking about that, it's crazy how we've said this before in the show. We've said it before, and you were saying earlier in there about your brisket and stuff early in the show. But it's amazing how much we'll help each other do better. Whenever there's no rhyme or reason to it. It makes no logical sense in the world, but we'll give a little information to help you do better, to get you competitive. Because the fact of the matter, we want you out there competing next weekend. We want you out there competing and hanging out with you and having a good time. But what we find out with that is a lot of times, a lot of us are using very similar or the same products. We're sharing this little thing we were talking about earlier about the brisket injection. We felt like got enough flavor to it. And we find out that, okay, well, everybody's doing it. We're all using this one piece. It's the same. So switch it up something different. Then things changed. And it's just really crazy how that little roller coaster goes as far as it helping each other out. It's really just throws me off my game sometimes. It's not throw me off my game. It's just really just crazy how much we help each other out.
Well, I mean, you saw Kerry jumping in there a few times. I was trimming chicken legs early in the year, and on a scale of 1 to 10, I was probably a 2 in the way I was hacking the chicken, and I was going after it, right? Kerry was looking at me like, good luck, buddy. And so I brought a couple extra legs and said, "Oh yeah, how do you trim?" And I was like, "Oh, that is a lot easier, a lot simpler, And so, I mean, did he tell me his recipe? No. Did he tell me how long he cooks? No. Did he tell me what's in his brine? No. But you're right. I mean, how does he trim versus I trim? Yeah. So I mean, that's part of what I do now. I use some of his. And to your point earlier about things changing, jacquarding the chicken leg.
Yeah.
I was pretty polite with my jacquard of the chicken leg, and I've got a lot of people saying, "You jacquarded chicken leg?" Yeah, jacquarded chicken leg. But I always have a pot of boiling water in there in the trailer for many reasons. May have to take it off, warm up honey if it's too cold outside. May have to wash something that's really greasy, pre-wash it. So I always try to keep a little bit of hot water on there. Well, after the jacquarding the chicken, I put my jacquard in the pan of water. Well, it melted. So you wouldn't, right? And it was a single, so it wasn't a double. So I went out and got another one. But I had a backup one in the drawer, but it wasn't the exact same model. It had like a third less of the time.
Yep.
Right. And for like 6 contests in a row, I could not understand my chicken score, and I didn't like my tenderness. Right? I'm like, what the hell? The tenderness has gone to hell. And I never even dawned on me the difference in the two Jacquards, right? And I came home. Well, the bus was with me in Wisconsin. I came home and I'm all pissed off. I'm borrowing their Traeger. I'm doing chicken runs, and I'm running chicken and it's coming out perfect. I'm running different versions of chicken and the tenderness is, cheap chicken, expensive, and the tenderness is perfect. I don't get it and I can't figure it out. In the drawer in the kitchen is the exact same model that I melted in the trailer. And I'm like, oh my God, something as stupid as that, right? The number of times in your Jacquard and the way you Jacquard would have that drastic effect in the process I use for a chicken leg. I'm like, who would have known? I mean, they came back and, we only suffered about a third of the season.
It's easy, man. It's really easy, the little things that, but again, at the same time, you could have went the other way. You could have had melted the bad one that you've been struggling with, and then had this one be a replacement. All of a sudden, find out that this one works better.
Yeah.
So I mean, sometimes like I said, sometimes we got to take those little small failures and find out. Sometimes we can learn from them and grow from them. And so it's one thing I always would encourage everybody with the show is take what we're saying out here and go out there. Excuse me. Take what's out there, go out there and just try it. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to mess up. I mean, I made this comment here, that little video we've got on here for the barbecue shotgun shells. If people knew how many times I've made that stupid things to be successful, have a successful video, they'd be like, man, I'd quit because we made them. And I'm probably actually going to remake it because I'm seeing the video and I'm like, I can do a better job on the video. And that's just the same thing. Same thing with YouTube. Go out there and just try it and do it because you're going to be suck when you first do it. You'll get better over time. You cooking out there, you're going to suck when you first try it. And today, one of my worst thing for me to do is make a bloody omelet in my stove on the side of the house. I can't make an omelet in a frying pan. On my Blackstone, on everything else, we can do it. But in the frying pan, for whatever reason, it drives me nuts. And my wife says I'm trying to go too fast. But I'm going to keep trying it. One day I'm going to do it right. It's crazy. Anyhow, you got any sponsors you want to shout out to?
Well, I mean, I don't have a ton. I mean, there's people I lean on. Jealous Devil is probably the biggest sponsor I have, and they've been wonderful. Scott and those guys, and have just been tremendous for me and supporting me, and keeping me filled. And as I move into the pellet game, they're getting me the pellets now, and that's kind of a nice little exciting thing to run those pellets and see the difference, compared to the street. And then Raber's Meat Market here in town, and Zare pork, is what I used for the season. It's a Duroc pork, and he works with the Raber's Market. So those are the two big ones that really are true sponsors.
That's awesome. We couldn't do this without people helping us, just sponsors, and for us working at this. And we've said this before, this is not a cheap hobby to get into. I'm going to not lie to you about that. It's a lot of fun. You'll meet some amazing people, and you'll see some downtown USA you never would see before if you've done it. But it's not a hobby that you can go out there and do this and feel like that it's going to be a profitable hobby. I mean,
that first call you get is going to cost you about $20,000, and your first grand championship is going to cost you another $100,000.
Yes, but at the same time is you can take this right here and do it as to have a good time at it. You can come out here and say, I'm going to do 5-6 contests with it right here close to the house and just enjoy it and have a good time and learn from it and do that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And a lot of people do that, and I commend you for it. But sometimes, like us, the last several years, we decide we want to go big into this and travel all over the country. And you'll see amazing people, meet great people, and it's something that I would encourage, if you can, to go do it. But at the same time, start small. Go there and take the judging class. Go there and sign up and take somebody's class that's been doing good in competition barbecue. Take their class. The Barbecue League on YouTube and their thing. There's more information out there than you'll ever dream of. Watch YouTube videos out there. I've got some out there for competition. Go out there and just check those videos out, because there's truly is a lot of information out there. And we're talking about the other day, somebody starting today cooking compared to when I started in 2010, you're going to jump me by 5 years, because the learning curve you're going to eliminate by all this information out here that's going to make it. And if you don't believe me, I'll show you a box what I turned in to start with and what I turn in now. And you'll look at me like, how the heck did that change? But the crazy part about it is that box back then got a good score. But if I turn in what I would love to turn in the barbecue. I turn in my very first competition today and see what will happen. I probably be DAL.
I know I would. I know. I would. Yeah, and I think the other key thing is that the barbecue is a community. Don't be afraid to ask the guy next to you, hey, and not everybody will say yes to this, but will you try my food? Where you share food, because how do you know what's good if you're not judging? And even then, you don't know whose box you judge per se. So you don't know if you judge the winner or the losers. You just know what was there. So I think one of the best way for a cook team is to, exchange food at a contest with a team that you respect, right? Or that you know of, right? And that way, when you get done, you can go, oh, that's, because it took a while, and I'm like, boy, there was nothing exciting about that chicken, and the answer is exactly correct, right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if the mentality is there's nothing wrong with it, right? Tell me what's wrong with it. Well, there's nothing wrong with it. Perfect. Right. That's what I want. I want chicken that's nothing's wrong with it. I don't want to try and get so creative that it was, wow, I had this splash of heat over here. And if you try to do all this stuff, you're going to find somebody you're not going to please. So, that's why I think saying hello to a neighbor, don't be obnoxious, be polite. And they may say no. I had a contest this year. A guy gave me a chicken leg. I took a bite out of it. I couldn't taste for 15 minutes. And I'm trying to figure out how do I cleanse my palate? Because my taste buds were gone, and I'm panicking going into ribs. So for those that get into that situation, if you don't have any dairy products other than butter, parquet works well. There was some parquet in my tongue.
The same side that is, what you also got to understand is, we're talking about Richard earlier with the score. If that guy had turned his chicken and you hit his table with chicken, and he scored ahead of you, he killed that table with that. So it might not be per se the judge's fault. It could have been another person at the table who done it. Because I said this story, God help whoever's doing this, but we done a contest several years back. We were back then making our own rubs and stuff at the contest. We didn't know any of this stuff here. This is a long time ago. And a buddy of mine was cooking with me, and I was giving him a recipe. I said, all right, make this rub. So I'm like, he's moving on and mixing everything together. I ain't tasted it. I mean, I trust the guy. I didn't taste it. Started putting on everything else. At the end of it, we're sitting there tasting the chicken. We're making the boxes. I'm like, this son of a bitch is hot as the devil. And I'm sitting going like, what the devil? Another piece of chicken hot. Another piece of chicken hot. I'm like, well, crap, we screwed something up. Go to the ribs. Same thing. I looked at him and said, what did you do? He looked at me and said, what do you mean? I said, all right, chicken I get. Now we were ribs, and pork was bad. I'm like, yeah, he had mixed up cayenne pepper and brown sugar. He switched them over. So where I went from 4 cups of brown sugar, we had 4 cups of cayenne.
Ouch.
So, I mean, God help, we killed everybody on the table we ever judged that judged it. But that was our fault, but it's just the name of the game.
Yeah. Yeah. No. So one other thing, though, I know for those of you that are members of KCBS, we do have an election getting up close. Get out there, go research the candidates. I don't know everybody on the board, and I'm not going to tell you what to do. I will tell you that the two on the subject we talked about if you're a cook team, right? I'm not telling you. I mean, we got organizers out there, we got judges out there. There's lots of great candidates. I could give you a list of 6 right off the top of my head that I would have no trouble getting on that board. But the score program and that seating program, between Childs and David McAllister, they're the people that can make it work right now, today, manually. You can't do that though. You can't sustain that, right? So we need that technology change of the core score program. But I personally, if those two aren't on the board, can they do it from outside of the board? I don't know, right? So they are so uniquely talented, those two individuals. It makes me nervous, and I think we only have 3 seats, right? So that makes me nervous, right?
Is Childs on the seat list right now?
Yeah, he's a candidate for election.
Oh, I know they were talking one time about they had predetermined.
That's another backstory.
Well,
But it goes to the bylaws. I mean, there KCBS bylaw. There's a nominating committee at the heart of it, right?
yeah.
There's a nominating committee that is made up of 3 people in the way it was previously executed. I mean, up until like 20 days ago, right? I disagree with that. I don't believe you take a subset of the board to determine who the board candidates should be. I disagree with that personally. So I think membership should determine who our candidates are, and then vote on the critical few. So I think we ought to be accountable for reducing, like a primary election. You get these 2 and then you bring forward the top candidates. I mean, something like that. And it ought to have regional input, right? If you're in the out east, the out east should bring a candidate to the table or 2, and you send one in, and somebody from the Midwest send one in, So I want more regionality in there. I think Anthony Minderman is very similar to that. He made some statements on that. But the current structure of the nominating committee for me is a no-go. I mean, you want to believe that you trust every board member that's sat to do the right thing, but to your point, whether it is a backdoor error or intent, Chow's not making the board as a candidate, let alone being elected. That's an issue, right? I mean, it really is an issue. Here's a qualified candidate that's been there, made changes, and he wasn't on the ballot. He is now. I mean, so they've corrected whatever backdoor errors there were. But then you look at the bylaws they want us to accept or bring in forward to us, and I don't accept those bylaws. So there's no way I'm going to support that.
Well, I think I haven't studied enough to really be able to make a educated statement other than with Childs. I will say this. I'm an own Childs and I'm a friend of Childs and stuff. So I am a little bit biased in that. But if somebody is on the board and then you tell me they can't run for re-election without some kind of disciplinary situation, then I'm going to look at you and be like, in my mind, that's losing faith in the system. Again, if something happened behind the scenes, I get that, but that's not it's behind the scenes. We have no knowledge about that. So don't start. When we start seeing this, only what we see this, we can't use that information because we're not aware of that information. We only base our decision on the information we have.
Right.
Now, and I'm not saying there was anything with that with Childs. I was just using an analogy. But that kind of made a bunch of people in there started looking at me like, all right, I don't understand this, and lost faith in it. But at the end of the day, God bless the people getting on the board, because that is a challenge in itself to be part of any kind of board, especially KCBS.
Yeah, a volunteer board. So
volunteer working board.
Yeah, actually worse, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to have a voluntary board to sit back and review, are you going in the right direction, right? And that's kind of what I look at. We hired Rod to do a job. Let's make sure the mission and the vision and the boundaries and the curbs are set, and then let him go do it and measure him on the journey and do some course corrections. We go left to right. Why do we have a working volunteer board? So I have a different issue here, but
well, and a board is not a working board. I mean, if you're working, it's not, you're not a board member. You're just I reckon technically you are, but it's not the same when we start having A board gives directions. A board gives, say, okay, this is guidance we want to take. I want you to come out here and I want you to make us money. I want you to come out here. I want you to focus on creating competitions in this part of the country. I want you to do this in this area. Go in these directions. Now you go take your staff and you make it work.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem we have in KCBS in that perspective is we don't have enough staff to push those in those directions. So we get the board in there from a working perspective and get them working. And then the other side is you look at the board members in this situation, and I ran for the board, so I'm going to say this for me in the situation is a lot of them get in that situation and they don't want to lose control of something other. It's their baby. It's what their passion is, and they want to make sure they hold on to it. Whereas, as Garrett said, here needs to be a think tank. Be like, all right, I want you to make a new yo-yo. Go out there and make a new yo-yo. And I think that's kind of what the board has got to get. It's got to start breaking itself down. Oh, by the way, Wes, I just want to let you know that your name is in orange right here. I just want to let you know that this right here. Your name is in orange, and I'm so loving this right now for you. It is so much fun. You probably gonna kill me now.
Know that joke there. So,
anyhow, but I mean, I think that's kind of where it's at. Is that a lot of us, as I wouldn't necessarily say losing faith in it, but I think a lot of us are seeing the changes been made with taking the seeding program away. Seeing the changes been made as far as just with COVID came in there. I mean, nobody in the world could have expected COVID to come here and totally change the barbecue the way it did. Instead of contests going on out there, fill me in on this. So I mean, I just think what KCBS is doing, what KCBS has done, I think it can do better. Yeah. And I expect it to do better. I expect them to take the information that they've got because we've got a passion that we want to come out here and do, and we want to keep doing it and keep going forward with it.
Yeah. I think there's, in my mind, there needs to be a mini strategic review, right? And talk about strategic changes that need to be made, right? If you think about it, there's judges, there's cooks, there's organizers, there's reps. I mean, we got all these lanes, right? But at the end of the day, there's a product, right? And everybody has a different role, kind of Y equals F of X, right? There's a function out there. Well, one of the big things, people come to a barbecue contest and, boy, I can't wait to try the barbecue. Well, we don't have any for sale. What do you mean? I saw it on TV. It's a big barbecue festival. You're not selling barbecue? Well, we can't. There's a lot of these things that the structure itself doesn't, you know what I'm saying? So we got to get organizers more tooled up, give them more answers, right? But we got to look at our product. What is our product, right? We got to play with it. And I'm not taking a pot shot at the steak, right? I think we missed the ball with steak, day late and dollar short. I think turkey is a very solid, approach. It's a different thing. It's not a me too, so I think that's there. But I think we need to look at the product. What is our product? I think KCBS ought to be a content creator, and we ought to lean on that for the public, right? I think we ought to be considered, demos. Remember back before COVID, KCBS would partner with not Cabela's, but
had Bass Pro Shop, had some stuff at Bass Pro Shop.
We'd have Bass.
They had some,
yeah.
McCormick, some season places. They come out to contests and they do the seasonings and stuff out there.
Yeah, I think
they had it ribs and stuff.
But whatever it is, whatever the right answers from the right people are, to your point, is that the board ought to be pressing the strategic direction we ought to be going, and then hand the keys to Rod and say, we're going to measure you on these factors. So go. We'll stay here, oversight, and watch you get there, or course correct along the way. Another pandemic or something happens, we got to jump in. But yeah, I think we got a structure issue here is what I think.
I mean, as far as bringing the public back into it, bringing stuff here, KCBS is not I've ran a lot of contests, been involved putting on a lot of contests. If I was going to anybody out there trying to raise money for a fundraiser, barbecue competition not the way. The KCBS barbecue competition not the way to raise money. Straight up, it will not do that. It is a competition of basically a private competition. Come in there. Want to be part of the festival, want to be part of all this stuff here. I get that. We want to do all that. But at the end of the day, if I'm raising money for a charity and I come here and raise money for charity, that money needs to go to a charity. That money does not need to go to pay competition guys come cook a contest. Maybe I'm wrong with that, but I'm just saying that's the way I look at it because I don't want my money to be given for a charity to find out that it's not given to a charity that's going somewhere else. What I think KCBS needs to do is a couple things, and we're way off my normal topic, but I'm going to say these right now. Number one is seeding program. Number two is work with the J Cup here to work with the seeding program to make that work as efficient thing. And number three, and this is probably the most radical of all of them, is take this country we've got, it's competition in the KCBS side of it, as far as where we at. We got the country break it up into 6 different quadrants. Okay, southeast, northeast, north, the middle part of the country in the north, middle part of the country in the south, and then northwest, northeast, south, whatever. Break the country up into 6 different areas, okay, on the map. And then have a 7th one be the international teams. Come in there. And then have all those areas in there. If you cook the majority of your contests in the southeast and your points in the southeast count. All right, get a team of the year in that part of the country. All right, take top 5 from those team of the year points in that part of the country. Then go do the KCBS Invitational to be team of the year as far as invitation. Now, all of a sudden, what you've got is you've got people chasing points, and all of a sudden, rather than one big ball game right here, you're chasing points and all these other pieces right here. And then you can get down to go of your honor, then you go to the World Invitational. Now you can find out who can come out on top. And you could do a double or whatever you want to do. But if you want to have it where you got it, that way you got people chasing the points, you'll have more people going after the points at the end of the year than you will just in one big ball game in the middle of the year.
Now, yeah, if you're not out of the gate by April, it's going to be hard to chase the points at all, right? I mean,
yep.
You had Triple H, you had Heavy Smoke, those guys were well vested by April, right?
Yeah.
Smoke Me Silly, right? They came out firing, right? I mean, they were hitting every other contest. So, if you're going to plan to start in April or May, in a overall one team of the year, good luck. You might get a category. You might make some run on a category, but it will be hard to chase the overall because you're just missing too many contests.
Yeah, it is. But at the same time is you got somewhere in your part of the country that don't really start probably till middle of May. Whereas down here in Florida, not down here, but in Florida, they're starting January.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but you got at the same time as you say, okay, Southeast right here. Yeah, you might have a longer season, but you cook the majority of your contests in Southeast, which say your best 8, whatever, then that's where your points are. And if I do most of mine in the Northeast, then I'll go to the Northeast, which I don't. But my point being is now it's another, you come over here, you got 5 or 6 teams that's going head to head in this little part of the world for points. Now it's another, okay, now they're going to advance to the next round up here at Kansas City Invitational to go for the team of the year. Mm-hmm. Now it's another, you've got a lot more people chasing that ball game.
Yeah, we should do that for the college football playoffs too.
Lord help us on that one.
No, I think, I agree. We could do some things that reduce the cost to the cook teams by regionalizing them instead of forcing. I mean, if you want to chase for a team of the year, you're going to be traveling like Uncle Pigs, like Slaps, like Heavy Smoke, like Triple H, like Carrie. I mean, you're going to travel. It's just the way it's going to be.
And what you can do it at is at the same time is for somebody that don't want to travel or can't travel that much, they still be competitive.
Yeah. Well, and to Wes's comment here, it goes back to kind of the multi-legged stool we're talking about, right? As much as I believe the world of KCBS is all about the cooks, it isn't, right? It's part of it, right? what's important to the cooks, and that's why I look at it as a portfolio. Right here, yeah, more on that coming, Brian. If you look at the overall portfolio and the products, cook teams are one piece of it, a very important piece. Judges are a very important piece. Organizers are kind of a critical link, right? If there's no organizers, no contesters, why do I need, you know what I'm saying? So you can't, none of these things can go to extremes. So, you know, that's why I look at it within the cook. What are the things most important to the cooks that we need to do? And I think Wes is absolutely correct. Okay. What are the things for judging we must do, and come up with those projects and prioritize them, because we don't have enough money to do everything. Right. And right now, I think at the core, pardon the pun, that score program needs to be replaced so we don't have a something dead in operation right now, right? It's not exciting to replace something, but it will allow us to do something, right? So it's you kind of got to look at all these things and say, you know, here's the things within each of these lanes, this portfolio called KCBS. Now, how are my products performing? And that's kind of where the board comes in to you know, Rod saying, how my product performing this year? What's my top sales? Or how many new teams we got? How many more organized? You know, I don't, you know, if you think about it as a KPI for a board, what are those key product indicators? You know, traditionally it's been number of teams cooking, number of contests, you know, I mean, those types of things. So anyway, so that's, I'm not disagreeing. I just want to make sure everybody realizes, even as the board, they got more pressing problems than just judging and just the stuff that we care about. Right. So I'm not giving them an out. I'm just saying you got to put the whole thing together. And that's why right now we're losing contests. Illinois was at 15 contests. Brian could probably remind me. I think we had in 2018, we might have had 15 contests. I think we're down to 7. You know,
I think that's across the board right now with trying to come out of the COVID situation. I think come out of reevaluating just the money that people's got and stuff. I think all that's going to start leveling stuff out in the next couple of years. I I believe this year's going to be another little bit of a slower year, but I think next year's going to probably kind of start picking back up. Um, just from what I'm kind of hearing from different people and different organizers and stuff like that. 'Cause I just think that I feel like when a lot of teams are looking at the end of the year this year and looking at the cost and the fuel costs and the expenses, and they're like, okay, this is challenging to do this, and especially you don't get no calls, but everybody can't win the contest either.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, we've got challenges. I just, that's why get a hold of some of these board members and ask to get a chat with them one-on-one, guys. I mean, if they want to be a board member, they should take your call. You should learn who the names are.
Yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to it. But from a cooking from starting out cooking from a backyard perspective and cooking out there for somebody wanting to get out there to do, we've gotten to a lot of the details from KCBS side of this situation. We really have gotten into to that, and what this shows you is that the passion we have for barbecue. I promise you, if we didn't have the passion for barbecue, we wouldn't have this conversation for as long as we've had, because we have something we're very passionate about. We want to share it. But the crazy part about this is, you come at the contest, we'll share it with you, and we'll let you get involved with this and get it just as much as we are about it. So I want y'all to know, anytime you see this contest, come up there and say hey to me. We'll let you try my food if I got it and give it away or whatever. But we'll definitely do that. Come out there and be part of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much we do in competition barbecue that is the basics for the backyard, for the home, right? We overcomplicate it, no doubt about it. But that's only because we're trying to narrow that variation every time. You don't have to worry about that at home. You really don't, right? But the strategies and the techniques are very valuable.
Yeah, definitely the strategy and techniques can definitely help up your game. But I would check out the stuff online. There's a lot of information out there, and reach out to us. Be happy to help you out when we can.
Yeah, I mean, I get a lot of people, asking me questions about pork that have done 2 pork butts, and I'm like, don't worry about it. we'll go from there.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Anything else you need to point out? Any sponsors? You already hit your sponsors. Got anybody else need to give a shout out to thank them for allowing you to do this crazy game?
Well, certainly my wife. She tolerates the road, and we're going to back it off this year. I think we did 35 contests last year, but it was intentional, right? We set some goals up, and then we changed our goals, right? And so don't be afraid to change your goals. I want to get back to the Royal. That was a number one goal, and took care of that in the first contest. So it's like, okay, now what are my goals? My goal is to offset some ordinary income, and competition barbecue is a way to work on your Schedule C to offset income as well. It's a polite way to say that. So we did that, and I tell you what, though, while I may never ever be in a position to do it again like last year, I sure as hell enjoyed every moment of it. And the summer, I think we had 3 or 4 weeks in a row where Brian and the bus and I were together. Some of those relaxing contests, and they're a high expectation team as well, but we had a blast, and it was very relaxing. And I don't normally say that about barbecue, that it was very relaxing. Going down to Collierville, I felt like I was part of the BBQ team there, or the Atlanta barbecue store. Wes and Smoke Me Silly, and the Rooters and Tooters. No power, no problem. We'll fix you up, Paul. Just a family. It was just a blast, right? It was, the Friday night dinners, Mexican dinners, and there's a lot to like about the world of competition barbecue. You don't have to win to enjoy it. Trust me. If you looked at that, then I was 3 for 35, I guess technically. That's not a great batting average. So, but in the world of barbecue, it was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. You meet a lot of great people. But with all that being said, thank y'all for watching that. We greatly appreciate it. Like I said, like, subscribe, share information. But it's a great conversation tonight, man. And we enjoy being part of it. And tune in next week. Be back for the same time for another show. Thank y'all.